This is Soundside. I'm Libby Dankman. Last night, I had a phone call with Alli McCrite. She's 20 years old. She lives in Rochester, Washington. That's in Grays Harbor County. And a few weeks ago, on the afternoon of April 8th, she saw something very strange.
How did you first encounter the blobs?
So I had just gotten home from work and it was like pretty rainy out. And my girlfriend's mom was like, "Hey, like come look outside. There's some weird blobs." And I was like, so I used to live in Oakville, so like obviously I knew about the Oakville blobs because everybody does.
Well, not everybody does. After all, we're talking about something that happened 31 years ago. But for people who do know about it, this is the stuff of Washington legend. It even made it into an episode of Unsolved Mysteries back in the day.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
It rained down from the heavens like a plague. Tiny, toxic blobs of goo that brought an outbreak of flu-like illnesses to Oakville, Washington, and left behind a perplexing mystery that may never be solved.
And yes, decades later, less than 10 miles away from Oakville, including right outside of Alli's house, it happened again.
And so what were the blobs like?
They're clear and like gelatinous. They're about the size of like the palm of your hand.
Oh, wow. So like bigger than what you hear about from the Oakville blobs 31 years ago. Like those ones were supposed to be small, but the ones you saw were pretty
Mhm.
big.
I mean, I do have small hands, but yes.
Wow. And sorry, did you say that there was a smell or this is
No,
a
they
weird
didn't
question,
have an
but
odor at all. It was very just interesting. Like it just kind of smelled like rainwater, I guess.
and I mean, yeah, so knowing Oakville history, you were like, it's happening again.
Yeah, no, exactly. I was like, "Oh my God, like this is crazy."
Back in 1994, there were dozens of reports out there about the mystery of the Oakville blobs. But it may have never made news without Tom Paulson, a former reporter who broke the story. And to be honest, he really didn't think much of the blobs at first.
Well, I started out thinking this was going to be kind of a joke, and it was a slow summer day, and I was working as both assignment editor and journalist, a reporter, and I assigned myself the story. This woman called up from Oakville and told me the brief story. She said blobs fell out of the sky, and her mom got sick, and a kitten died, and I just was looking for some way to get out of the office, and so we drove down. The photographer and I drove down to Oakville.
What paper were you working for at the time?
I was with the Seattle Post-Intelligencer back when it actually was a paper.
Absolutely.
A photographer and I drove down, and we just thought this was a way to get out of the office. We didn't think this was going to be anything. And because there's, as we know, many conspiracy theories out there and a lot of goofy things that happen. And we went and met with Dottie Hearn and Sonny Barcliff, the mother and daughter. Sonny was the daughter. They told us this dramatic story about how these blobs fell out of the sky and they got sick, the kitten died. And I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I'm writing it down thinking I'm just going to have a fun, goofy story here. And then it started raining while we were there and blobs fell out of the sky. I mean, if you watch some of the TV shows afterwards, they make it sound like huge blobs the size of watermelons fell out of the sky. These were little tiny clear gelatinous blobs about this half the size of a grain of rice. And so I collected some and just took it with me. And I'm like, well, that's weird. And I have a background in chemistry. I was a science and medical reporter for the PI. So I was going to try and get these things tested. I went back and I wrote a joke story. I thought it was kind of a joke, but it was presented as a serious report. And it did happen. I mean, I saw the blobs. I thought, well, maybe it was airplane waste. They're not supposed to eject waste from their toilets in flight, but who knows?
But you were
There's
still
all,
brushing it off at that point, Tom, even though you saw it in person?
yeah, I mean, they had a cornfield next to their home, and I thought it was maybe just cornstarch when it gets moist and it rains, cornstarch coming out. And I just thought it was nothing. But I thought I'm going to play this out. I took a trip. So we wrote the story. I called the FAA, tried to find out if there was any chance this was a toilet eject from a commercial airline. They said no, it would be colored blue because it's got antifreeze or dye in it. So clear, no, not us. There's also a practice bombing run for McChord Air Force Base. They flew right over all the time and dropped bombs out in the ocean. And So I called McChord Air Force Base. They thought it was kind of funny. They played along and said no, they didn't drop anything on anybody. And I talked to the police chief down in Oakville. He saw him and he didn't act at first like it was a big deal. Although if you look at Unsolved Mysteries and some of the TV shows later, the police are getting covered in goo and very
It
dramatic.
was a
And
torrent of goo, yeah. So all these
so
people you're calling up, the local possibilities, your best guesses of where the blobs could have come from, you're coming up with nothing at that point. I mean, where do you turn next?
Well, and she had fallen ill, and the hospital, a physician at the hospital down there, he had tested him because they brought him in saying, we think this made Dottie sick. He found evidence of white blood cells, but said he didn't think it was anything serious. That's why he thought it was airplane sewage waste. Then, because Dottie and Sonny didn't think he took it that seriously, they wanted to sample, sent somewhere else to test. Department of Ecology tested and said, no, it's not anything living. It looks like it's inorganic. Then it went to the Department of Health. Microbiologist took it seriously and did test for it, and he said he thought it was animal cells of some kind and had some bacteria, common bacteria, but it was contaminated with bacteria. Anyway, so
Wait, so
people
you have
were,
conflicting reports then from different people testing this, saying it's inorganic and then saying it's organic?
yeah. So the testing resolved nothing. And then if you watch TV shows, I don't remember this, but they said men who looked military came into town secretly, and all the samples disappeared from the hospital and from the Department of Health. And I don't know about that. I missed that part of the story, but it got to be this cover up, and there are a lot of different theories in town. One was that it was a military biological warfare experiment. One was that the bombs blew up jellyfish, and the jellyfish pieces fell back in town,
Oh, the
which had,
test bombs that were being dropped ended up blowing up a large jellyfish and dropping all over people's
well,
houses?
or many jellyfish.
Uh-huh, okay.
Yeah. I forget what some of the other theories were, but one of the serious offshoots, and you never know what's going to happen with with stories. Again, I started out thinking this was kind of a joke, but it was something to do. And like I said, a lot of the officials were taking it seriously, and some were just playing along. But it turned out when I wrote the first story and talked about the bombing runs going over there, that the military was not supposed to be dropping live bombs in that part of the ocean. It's a marine sanctuary. So two Congress people read my story, which again, it was like blobs fall from the sky, kitten dies. It's kind of a goofy
It was
story.
supposed to be a bit of a lark, yeah.
Jolene Unsold, who's one of the Congress people down there, and Norm Dix, I think, went nuts and called me up to find out what McCord had told me because they said this was a violation of the Marine Sanctuary and that they were not supposed to be dropping bombs. So that became a whole other story. And so it turned into a real controversy.
So you
And
just
then I
never
just,
know when you're a young reporter or an assignment editor and something comes across your desk, what could come of it? And maybe getting out there
yeah,
creates ripple effects. Yeah.
it spawned some real news. Anyway, eventually, because it just kind of kept spinning out of control and getting bigger and weirder and more conspiratorial, I remembered I had blobs myself in the refrigerator. So I wanted to take him to an independent lab, and the PI was willing to spend up to $100 on the test. They just, didn't want to spend a lot on it. So I sent it to a private lab, and they said they could do a basic test for that amount of money. But what they came back with was that it was polyacrylamide, which is this stuff in potting soil that soaks up water, those little blobs if you do gardening. They're in the potting soil or in babies' diapers. It's a material that's made to soak up water.
Oh, that gel stuff that soaks up water that
Right.
keeps things dry.
That's what their guess was. And of course, nobody really wanted to accept that. That's a boring answer, I guess. They wanted biological warfare or jellyfish or whatever. But
But why would that stuff be falling from the sky, Tom?
well, we don't know.
Well, so at one point did you realize that this was getting like national attention?
Right away, actually. I mean, it went nuts right away. I mean, it is a legitimate mystery. It's still, and I guess the BBC had a story on it a while ago, and they said it happened somewhere in England, similar thing.
The blobs have fallen elsewhere.
Yeah, there's something called astral jelly that they think comes out of meteors. Anyway,
What?
it's no, it just yeah, astral jelly. But at any rate, yeah, I don't know what it is, but yeah,
So
it's just kept going and going. I've never, as a journalist, I covered a lot of, I talked to Nobel Prize winning scientists. I talked to several presidents, talked to Bill and Melinda Gates, went to Africa and Asia, did all these really important stories. And the blobs of Oakville are probably the most long-lived, most re-reported story of mine. So that's my legacy is the blobs of Oakville.
and that's the reason we called you up today, and,
Yeah.
and that we were really excited to get to talk with you because you've actually been in the presence of these blobs. Can I just focus back on the conversations that you had with folks about their health effects? I mean, you heard that the Unsolved Mysteries folks reported that several people fell ill, that there were pets and small animals that died. Did you ever get a sense of the scope of how serious the health effects were?
Well, my experience reporting on it, a couple people fell ill. Dottie fell ill. The kitten did die. I guess there were other dead animals, small animals. One of the TV shows shows a dead cow. I never saw a dead cow. And well, later on, I learned they claimed that they were sickened. I didn't hear about it at the time. But from my perspective, it still could have all been coincidental, the amount of sickness and animal deaths. I didn't see any big swell of illness around this. And I didn't get sick. I picked it up with my hands and stuffed it in a baggie.
So, what did you think when you heard that there was a potential new case of blobs falling from the sky near Oakville?
Well, I guess I'm not surprised. I mean, I think it's, like I said, I think it's happened. The story seems to come back of its own every couple years. And then like I said, I'll read up on it. And then other people report seeing this. There was a report of this in Wisconsin. So I think it's something. It's something atmospheric. Whether or not it's a health hazard or not, I don't know. It's a mystery.
It's a mystery. Do you think it will ever be solved?
Well, I think, yeah, if somebody really wants to solve it, I mean, I think, I think people like mysteries better than they like solutions.
Can I ask you a final question? This came to
Sure.
mind when you were wondering what the gel blobby goo was falling from the sky. Did you ever try tasting it?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have done that. I had one minor theory that it was maybe the military planes probably don't have to dye their sewage blue, so maybe it was military toilet water. Knowing it could have had some kind of bacteria or human cells in it, I'd never thought of tasting it, I have to admit.
That's fair. Now that I know you suspected the sewage, I suppose that makes sense. Well, the blob story lives on, and you will always be remembered. I'm sure for your other really important stories, but but mostly for
No,
the
but mostly
blobs.
for the blobs, yeah.
Any final thoughts before we go, Tom, on this whole thing and the fact that it's come back up again, that we're seeing the blobs falling once more?
Well, I wish somebody would solve it. That'd be great. It can't be that hard. Get somebody out there.
What do
I
you
don't
think
know,
they
yeah.
are?
I really don't know. I'm guessing it's just some sort of weird weather phenomenon, just 'cause like they didn't seem chemically or anything. They were just kind of like watery and like they melted after a while, but they weren't ice. Like it was very gelatinous. They were just really like it felt like you were holding jello, but they were like kind of like a little dirty. I don't know.
Wow.
They they did not smell at all. Like it was like just like it smelled like clean rainwater. Um I genuinely think it was more of like either an ocean thing or a weather thing because they didn't smell and like they weren't super like gross. Like they were just like, you know how rainwater is like clean but still a little dirty?
Yeah.
It was kind of like that.
Wow. Okay, so I was on the phone with my dad earlier, and his theory was that in some places it can like really randomly, because of a weather event, rain fish. And so his theory was that it was like some kind of similar
Like a
thing.
jellyfish?
Yes, like a jellyfish, like an
Clearly, I could talk about this for hours. You're listening to Soundside on KUOW.